He thanked her and hung up. He felt a sense of relief that was deeper and more satisfying than closing a major deal. He leaned back in his chair and looked out at the city. His city. From up here, the people were just tiny dots. But he had just been down there with one of those dots, and her world, her problem, had mattered more than anything happening in this skyscraper. A new thought began to form in his mind. It was a thought about systems and solutions, the kind of thought he was very good at. The girl had found a problem, abandoned animals with nowhere to go, and she had used her own body and spirit to solve it. But she shouldn't have had to. What about the next child who finds a box of kittens? What about the shelters that are too full? What about the people who want to help but don't know how? He picked up his phone again. This time he called his head of corporate strategy. The man came in looking expectant, ready to talk about mergers or acquisitions. "I have a new project for you," the billionaire said. "I want to start a foundation. Its purpose will be to help animals in the city who have no one else." The strategist was surprised, but he quickly pulled out a notebook. "Of course, sir. What is the business angle? Public relations? Tax benefits?" The billionaire shook his head. "No angle. The purpose is to help. I want to fund the no-kill shelters. I want to create a network of foster families and support them, pay for their supplies and veterinary care. I want a program that helps people in neighborhoods who find animals but can't afford a vet. And I want an education program for young people, to teach them how to care for animals responsibly." He spoke with a clarity and focus that was usually reserved for his biggest business ventures. This was not a charity side project. This was a new mission. He was using his power, his resources, and his brilliant mind not to make more money but to build a safety net. A net that would have been there to catch that young girl and her kittens before they ever had to sit on a hot bench. Over the next few weeks, things began to move. Lawyers were hired. Paperwork was filed. He called it the Guardian Foundation. He didn't put his name on it. The name was for the girl, who was the truest guardian he had ever met. One afternoon, about a month later, he was in his office when his personal assistant came in. She was holding a small, plain envelope. "This was handed in at the front desk," she said. "It's for you." They said a young girl dropped it off. His heart beat a little faster. He took the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside there was no letter. There was a single small photograph. It was a picture of 2 kittens. They were no longer tiny, helpless bundles. They were bigger now, with bright, curious eyes and glossy fur. One was chasing a red ball of yarn. The other was curled up on the lap of an older woman, whose face was beaming with a happy smile. On the back of the photograph, written in simple, careful handwriting, were just 2 words: "Thank you." He stared at the picture for a long, long time. He looked at the healthy, happy kittens. He looked at the smiling woman who had given them a home. This was the result. This was the profit. This was the real success. He didn't frame the picture and put it on his wall. He put it in the top drawer of his desk where he could look at it every day. It was a reminder of where real value lies, a reminder that the most important deals are not made in boardrooms but on park benches, a reminder that a single act of compassion from a girl in a heavy coat on a hot day can change everything. The billionaire went back to his work. He still ran his companies. He still made his deals. But now he was also a guardian, and he knew without a doubt that this was the most important role he would ever play. The story that started with a moment of noticing had become a story that would change countless lives, all because one person decided to stop and another decided to care. And in the end, that was everything. The city was a furnace that summer afternoon. The sun didn't just shine. It pressed down on the sidewalks and the streets, making the air above the black asphalt shimmer and dance. People moved with a single purpose: to get from one air-conditioned building to the next as quickly as possible. Men in crisp suits had loosened their ties and women fanned their faces with folders. The usual loud, fast rhythm of the city had slowed to a hot, sticky crawl. In the middle of this, a man stepped out of a long, silent, and deeply air-conditioned car. He was a man people noticed, not because he was overly tall or loud, but because of the quiet space that seemed to exist around him. He was important, and the world naturally made room for him. He was one of the richest people in the city, a man who built and sold companies the way other people might build and dismantle a Lego set. His mind was always working, calculating numbers, strategies, and opportunities. Right now, His mind was focused on a meeting he was about to have in a glittering glass tower, a meeting where millions of dollars were on the line. He took a few smooth steps on the pavement, his shoes barely making a sound. His driver waited patiently, the car a cool sanctuary ready for his return. It was then, as his eyes scanned the path ahead, that they landed on something that didn't fit. It was like a single still frame in a fast-moving movie. On a public bench made of dark, heat-soaked metal and slats of wood, a young girl sat perfectly still. She looked to be about 13 or 14. What made his brain, so used to patterns and logic, stutter was what she was wearing. While everyone else was in t-shirts and light dresses, she was bundled up in a thick, puffy winter coat. It was old, a faded black that had turned gray in places, and it was zipped all the way up to her chin. The man, used to efficiency, found this deeply inefficient. Why would someone cause themselves such discomfort? His first fleeting thought was one of mild irritation, the same feeling he got when he saw a poorly run business. It was a foolish decision, but as he took another step, he stopped. He really looked at her. She wasn't just wearing the coat. She was almost hiding inside it. Her shoulders were hunched and her arms were wrapped tightly around her middle, as if she was holding herself together. A fine layer of sweat glistened on her temples and her upper lip. People streamed past her, not even glancing her way. She was just another part of the city's furniture, invisible. But to this man, in that moment, she was the most visible thing on the street. The meeting in the glass tower, the millions of dollars, it all started to fade into a dull hum in the back of his mind. This was a different kind of problem, one he couldn't immediately solve with a phone call or a signature. He felt a strange tug in his chest, a feeling he wasn't very familiar with. It wasn't pity exactly. It was more like curiosity mixed with a sudden, sharp need to understand. What was the variable he was missing? What was the logic behind this illogical act? He made a decision. He turned slightly, altering his path from the glass tower doors toward the public bench. His driver, noticing the change, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The man approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. He could see the details now. The coat was too big for her, the sleeves covering her hands. At her feet was a faded blue backpack, so full that the zipper was straining, with what looked like a corner of a blanket poking out. She kept her head down, but her eyes, dark and wide, flicked up for a second to see him coming. He saw a flash of fear in them before she looked back down at her shoes. He stood near the bench, not too close, and cleared his throat softly. When he spoke, his voice was different. It had lost its boardroom edge and was quieter, gentler. It was a voice he hadn't used in a very long time. "Excuse me," he said. The girl flinched just a little and hugged herself tighter. "I don't mean to bother you," he continued, "but are you feeling all right? It's a very hot day to be wearing a coat like that." For a long moment, he didn't think she would answer. She just sat there, a statue of discomfort. Then she gave a tiny, quick shake of her head, still not looking at him. She wasn't unwell, so that wasn't the reason. His eyes dropped to the front of her coat where her arms were crossed. She was holding it closed, but there was a strange, bulky shape beneath the fabric right against her stomach. It wasn't the natural shape of her body. It was something else, something she was deliberately hiding. The puzzle deepened. The businessman in him was frustrated. The human in him was concerned. He was about to ask another question, to try and find the right angle to understand this situation, when a very small, almost silent sound came from inside the coat. It was a faint, squeaky whimper. It was so quiet he almost thought he'd imagined it. But the girl's reaction confirmed it. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a new kind of panic. She looked directly at him, and for the first time he saw the full picture in her face. It wasn't just sweat on her skin. It was the strain of carrying a heavy secret in the brutal heat. The defiance he saw earlier was really just a brave front for a deep and overwhelming worry. Slowly, hesitantly, as if making a decision that could change everything, her trembling hands moved to the zipper of her coat. The sound it made was loud in the space between them, a rough, rasping noise as she pulled it down, and as the coat fell open, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the billionaire's world for a moment stopped turning. The sound of the zipper was harsh and loud, cutting through the city's background noise. The man watched. His mind, usually racing with 1,000 thoughts at once, had gone completely quiet and still. He was just watching, waiting to understand. As the coat opened, he saw what she had been hiding. It wasn't something stolen or dangerous. It was something fragile. Nestled against her chest, Tucked safely inside a kind of sling made from a piece of old cloth was a tiny, sleeping kitten. It was so small its fur was still fluffy like a dandelion seed, and its sides moved in and out with quick, shallow breaths. Right next to it, poking out from the deep pocket of her coat, was the fuzzy head of another. This one was awake, its bright blue eyes peering out, confused by the sudden rush of light and air. The girl's hands, which had been trembling before, now became gentle. She cupped the head of the second kitten with a single finger, soothing it. All the fear and defiance in her face melted away, replaced by a look of pure, fierce care. She was their protector. The man was speechless. The simple, profound truth of it washed over him. The heavy winter coat in the blazing heat wasn't a foolish choice. It was a desperate solution. It was a mobile incubator, a shelter, a hiding place. This young girl was using her own body, suffering through the terrible discomfort to keep these two tiny creatures safe. He slowly, carefully, sat down on the far end of the bench, giving her plenty of space. He didn't want to scare her or the kittens. "Oh," he said, and it was all he could manage. His voice was a soft whisper. "I see." The girl watched him warily, her arms still curled protectively around the kittens. The initial surprise was fading, and the reality of the situation was settling in. The man, a master of asking the right questions to get to the bottom of a complex deal, now found himself asking the simplest one. "Are they okay?" She nodded, but it wasn't a confident nod. It was a worried one. "I think so," she whispered, her voice barely audible. They were crying a lot before. "But it's so hot. I was scared." She looked down at the sleeping kitten against her chest, and her chin wobbled just a little. "Where did you find them?" he asked, keeping his tone low and calm like he was talking to a scared animal himself. She took a shaky breath. "Behind my building. In a box. There were 3. She stopped, and her eyes got a little glassy. "One didn't. It didn't make it last night. I tried, but—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The man felt a cold knot form in his stomach, a feeling very different from the heat around them. He looked at the 2 surviving kittens, so small and completely dependent on this child who had taken them in. "I had to take them," she continued, her voice gaining a little strength, fueled by the need to explain herself. "My mom, she said we can't have pets. Our landlord doesn't allow it. She said I had to leave them where I found them." The girl shook her head, a stubborn look returning to her eyes. "But I couldn't, they would have died. It's too hot and there are other animals out there." So this was her secret rebellion, a mission of mercy she had to hide from her own family. She had probably been out here for hours, walking, maybe trying to find a place that would take them, with no money and no plan, just a fierce determination not to let them die. "I tried the shelter a few blocks away," she said, confirming his thoughts. "But the lady said they were too full for strays. She said they were too young and would need bottle feeding every few hours. She didn't have the people to do it." The girl's shoulders slumped. She was nice, but she couldn't help. "So I didn't know what else to do. I put them in my coat so they'd be warm and safe. I thought maybe I could find someone." Her voice trailed off. She was at the end of her hope. She was tired, hot, and carrying the immense weight of responsibility for 2 fragile lives. The man looked from her sweaty, determined face to the tiny, vulnerable kittens, and then at the straining backpack. He pointed to it. "What's in there?" "Stuff for them," she said, leaning over to unzip it a little. He could see a small old towel, a little dish, and an empty plastic water bottle. She had tried to prepare. She had given this everything she had. For the billionaire, the world had narrowed down to this single bench. The sounds of the traffic, the people walking by, the towering buildings, it all faded into a distant blur. Here was a problem that couldn't be solved with money alone. Not directly. Throwing cash at her would be meaningless. He could see the resolve in her eyes. She wasn't looking for a handout. She was looking for a solution for the kittens. His mind, which had been still, began to work again, but in a new way. It wasn't thinking about profit and loss. It was thinking about logistics, about needs, about a permanent, safe outcome. He thought about the animal shelters he knew of, the ones that were well-funded and had veterinarians on staff. He thought about what these kittens truly needed: a professional checkup, proper milk, a warm, clean place. He looked at the girl. "You did a very brave thing," he said, and he meant it more than he had meant anything in a long time. "You are a very good person to do this for them." Hearing those words, the girl's tough exterior finally cracked. A single tear escaped and traced a clean line through the sweat on her cheek. She quickly wiped it away with her shoulder. The man made a decision. He wasn't going to this meeting. The millions of dollars could wait. This couldn't. He reached into his pocket, but not for his wallet. He pulled out his phone. It was a simple, quiet action, but it felt more significant than signing a billion-dollar contract. He was about to use his power not for his own gain, but to solve a problem for a stranger and her two tiny charges. The real work was just beginning. The man held his phone, but for a moment he didn't dial. He just looked at it. This small, sleek device in his hand held the power to move markets and summon important people from across the city. But right now he needed to use it for something far more delicate. He wasn't calling a business partner. He was about to intervene in a young girl's life, and he knew he had to be careful. The trust between them was as fragile as the kitten she held. He looked at her. She was watching the phone, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She was probably wondering if he was calling the police or someone who would take the kittens away to a bad end. "Would it be all right?" he began, his voice still soft. "If I made a call? I know someone who can help. A good place, a safe place for them." The girl hesitated. Her arms tightened instinctively around the kittens. "What kind of place?" she asked, her voice small. "A place with a doctor for animals," he explained. "A veterinarian. They can check these little ones, make sure they are healthy. They can give them the special milk they need. And they will find them a good home, I promise you. A warm home with a family." He could see the war happening inside her. On one side was her fierce desire to protect them herself. On the other was the crushing knowledge that she had run out of options. She looked down at the kitten sleeping against her chest, its tiny body rising and falling. She looked at the other one, who was now mewling softly, a tiny squeaky sound of hunger. She knew she couldn't provide what they needed. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "But can I come with you? I need to know they'll be safe." "Of course you can come," the man said, and he meant it. "You are their protector. You should be there." With her permission given, he pressed a single button on his phone, a speed dial number. The person on the other end picked up immediately. It was his personal assistant, a woman who was used to handling his complex schedule and urgent business requests. "Hello, sir." Her efficient voice came through the phone. The man took a breath. "I need you to cancel my 11 o'clock meeting. Something urgent has come up." He didn't wait for a question or a reaction. "I need you to call Dr. Evans at the Animal Care Center. Tell him I am bringing in 2 newborn kittens in need of immediate attention. They are very young and likely dehydrated. He should be ready for us." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. The assistant was the picture of professionalism, but this request was far outside the normal pattern of her day. "Of course, sir. Right away. Is there anything else?" "Yes," the man said, his eyes still on the girl. "I need you to go to a pet store. Buy a small pet carrier, the soft-sided kind. Also, get the supplies for newborn kittens, the special formula, tiny bottles, a warm blanket. Bring it all to the Animal Care Center as quickly as you can." "Understood. I will handle it," the assistant said, and the line went dead. The man put his phone away. He looked at the girl. "It's done. A doctor is waiting for us, and my assistant is bringing a proper carrier and some food for them." The girl's eyes were wide. She had just watched him, in less than a minute, arrange everything she had been desperately trying to find for hours. The relief on her face was so powerful it was almost painful to see. The tension in her small shoulders seemed to ease just a little. "Thank you," she said, and the words were filled with so much emotion, they seemed to hang in the hot air between them. "Let's get you all out of this heat," the man said, standing up. He gestured towards his car, which was still idling silently a short distance away. The driver was already standing by the door, his face a mask of neutral curiosity. The girl stood up carefully, moving slowly so as not to jostle the kittens. She picked up her heavy backpack, but the man gently reached for it. "Let me," he said. She hesitated for a second, then let him take it. It felt incredibly light, yet he knew the burden it represented was immense. They walked the short distance to the car. The driver, a man who had seen many strange things in his job, opened the rear door without a word. The cool, clean air from inside the car flowed out, a welcome relief. The girl paused at the door, looking at the pristine, light-colored leather seats. She looked down at her old coat and the kittens. She was worried about making a mess. "It's perfectly fine," the man said, understanding her hesitation. Please get in. She slid into the seat, moving with great care, keeping her body curved to protect the kittens. The man got in on the other side and gave the driver the address of the animal clinic. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent. The noisy, hot world outside was suddenly muted, separated by the tinted glass. Inside it was quiet and cool. The only sound was the faint, squeaky mewing from the kittens. The girl leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes for just a moment. The man could see the exhaustion on her face, the kind that comes from carrying not just a physical weight but a heavy emotional one. She'd been brave for so long, and now for the first time she could let someone else share the load. He didn't speak during the ride. He just watched the city go by, but it looked different to him now. The tall buildings weren't just symbols of money and power. They were places where people lived, where stories like this one were happening every day, hidden from view. He had been so high up in his glass tower, he had forgotten what the world looked like from the street level, from a public bench. He glanced at the girl. She had opened her eyes and was looking down at the kittens, whispering to them softly, telling them everything was going to be all right now. In that moment, the billionaire knew that the most important thing he would do all day, perhaps all year, was not happening in a boardroom. It was happening in the back of his car with a brave young girl and two tiny, helpless lives. They were almost at the clinic, and a new chapter of the story was about to begin. The car moved through the city like a silent, cool bubble. Inside, the girl sat perfectly still, her focus entirely on the two small lives nestled against her. The man watched the city pass by his window, but he wasn't really seeing the buildings. His mind was quiet, just observing. He noticed the careful way she held herself, how every bump in the road made her tense up, her arms tightening protectively. She was a fortress, and these kittens were her most precious treasure. After a short drive, the car pulled up in front of a clean, modern-looking building with a sign that had a picture of a happy dog and a cat on it. The driver opened the door, and the cool air from inside the car mixed with the warm air from outside. As they stepped out, a woman in a crisp blue uniform came out of the clinic's front door. She had a kind, capable face and a warm smile. "You must be our special guest," she said, her voice friendly and calm. "I'm the head veterinary technician. Dr. Evans is ready for you. Please come right this way." The girl looked up at the man, a question in her eyes. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. "It's okay. They're expecting us." They were led not into a crowded waiting room, but directly into a quiet, bright examination room. It was clean and smelled faintly of antiseptic. In the middle of the room was a large stainless steel table covered with a soft towel. A man with gentle eyes and a white coat stood there, his hands in his pockets. "Hello there," the doctor said, his voice as soft as the room's lighting. "Let's have a look at these little ones you've been taking such good care of." This was the moment of truth. The girl looked at the table, then down at the kittens. She had been their only home for what must have felt like a long time. Letting go, even to help them, was the hardest thing she had ever had to do. Slowly, with trembling hands, she began the process of carefully lifting them out from the warmth of her coat. The one in the sling woke up and let out a tiny, confused mew. The girl's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she didn't let them fall. She was being brave for them, one last time. She placed them gently on the soft towel. They looked incredibly small and vulnerable under the bright lights. The doctor and the technician moved with a slow, practiced grace. They didn't grab or poke. They used warm stethoscopes in gentle hands. The man stood back, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. He was just an observer now. This was her moment. He watched as the girl stood right by the table, her body tense, her eyes glued to every move the doctor made. The doctor listened to their hearts and lungs. He checked their mouths and their tiny bodies. He weighed them on a small digital scale. The numbers were very low. The technician prepared a small dish of warm water and, using a tiny syringe, offered a drop to each kitten. They lapped at it weakly. "Well," the doctor said finally, looking at the girl with a warm smile, "you are a hero. You know that, right?" The girl looked up, surprised. "These two are severely dehydrated," the doctor explained, "and very underweight. A few more hours in that heat without proper care." He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the room understood. You keeping them warm and getting them here is the only reason they are still with us. You did everything right." The relief that washed over the girl's face was so powerful it seemed to light up the room. A single happy tear finally escaped and rolled down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. Just then, the door to the examination room opened. The man's assistant walked in, carrying a brand new, soft-sided pet carrier. It was a dark navy blue. She also had a bag from a pet store. Inside was a can of kitten formula, a set of tiny bottles, soft blankets, and a small plush toy. "Perfect timing," the man said, taking the carrier and the bag. He placed them on a chair nearby. The doctor showed the girl how to mix the formula and how to hold the tiny bottle so the kittens could drink. The first kitten, the more awake one, latched on immediately, drinking with a frantic, desperate energy. The girl helped hold the bottle, her face a picture of intense concentration. While she was focused on feeding, the man spoke quietly with the doctor near the door. "They're stable," the doctor said in a low voice, "but they need round-the-clock care for the next week or two. They'll need to be fed every few hours. We have a wonderful foster network. We'll place them with an experienced volunteer tonight." The man nodded. "Spare no expense. I want the best care for them, and I want to be kept informed of their progress." "Of course," the doctor said. The girl finished feeding the first kitten, which now had a visibly round little belly and was falling into a contented sleep. She carefully picked it up and, following the technician's guidance, placed it on a new, fluffy blanket inside the new carrier. It snuggled down into the softness. She then repeated the process with the second, sleepier kitten, who also drank a little before drifting off. With both kittens now safe, warm, and full, sleeping soundly in their new, temporary home, a profound silence fell over the girl. The mission was over. The immediate crisis was averted. The adrenaline that had been keeping her going for hours finally faded, and what was left was a deep, bone-tired exhaustion. She looked at the carrier, then at the man. The words seemed to get stuck in her throat. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. For everything." The man shook his head. "You don't have to thank me. You are the one who did the hard part. You saved them." He picked up the carrier. It was surprisingly light. He handed it to the technician, who promised they would be taken to a warm, quiet place until their foster family arrived. The girl gave one last, long look at the kittens, a look full of love and sadness and hope. Then she turned and walked out of the room with the man. They stepped back out into the daylight. The heat of the day was finally starting to break, and a gentle breeze had picked up. The girl stood on the sidewalk, clutching her now empty backpack. She looked lost. Her great purpose had been fulfilled, and now she had to go back to her normal life. The man understood that feeling. The job wasn't quite finished. He turned to her. "Can I give you a ride home?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. No, thank you. It's not far." She pointed in a general direction. "I can walk." He didn't push. He respected her courage and her independence. He reached into his inner pocket. This time, he didn't pull out his phone. He pulled out a simple, clean business card. It was thick, heavy paper with just his name and a private phone number printed on it. He held it out to her. "This is a direct line to me," he said. "No secretaries, no assistants. If you ever need anything at all, if you want an update on the kittens, or if you have a problem, or if you just need help, you call this number. Anytime. Do you understand?" She looked at the card, then up at him. She saw that he was completely serious. She took the card, holding it carefully with both hands as if it were a rare and precious thing. "I understand," she said softly. "Good," he said. He gave her one last kind look. "You should go home, get some rest, you've earned it." She nodded, gave him a small, shy smile, and then turned and started walking down the sidewalk, her figure getting smaller and smaller until she turned a corner and was gone. The man stood there for a long moment, watching the space where she had been. The city didn't feel like a furnace anymore. It felt alive, full of invisible stories of quiet bravery. He got back into his car, but his mind wasn't on the meeting he had missed. It was on a girl with a heart bigger than any building in this city, and on two tiny kittens who now had a chance at life, all because of a single, selfless act on a hot summer day. The man sat in the back of his quiet car, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't the empty silence of a busy mind taking a break. It was a full silence filled with the memory of what had just happened. He looked at his hands. For years, they had held pens to sign contracts that affected thousands of people. Today, they had held a backpack with a little towel and a dish inside. The second thing felt more important. He thought about the girl walking home. He thought about the fierce love in her eyes when she looked at those kittens. He thought about the weight of the carrier as he handed it to the technician. Most of all, he thought about the simple, powerful truth she had shown him, that the greatest courage is often found in the quietest acts of kindness. When he got back to his office, a tall glass room high above the city, everything looked the same views, the same expensive furniture, the same stack of papers waiting for his signature. But he felt different. The meeting he had missed was rescheduled for the next day. The people involved were confused, but they agreed. He sat at his large empty desk and picked up his phone. He didn't call about business. He called the animal clinic. The same technician answered. "The kittens are doing well," she reported, her voice cheerful. "They've been placed with one of our most experienced foster volunteers. She'll be feeding them through the night. They have a long way to go, but their chances are excellent."